What Moses experienced on Mount Horeb was not just a unique moment, it was the turning point that revealed not only his destiny but also the future of an entire people. The burning bush represents much more than a simple event, it is a symbol of how God's presence manifests in moments of transition and challenge. But there is more, much more, that we must explore. Moses' story in the desert reveals that sometimes, before fulfilling our purpose, we must confront our own limitations and deepest fears. God didn't just give Moses a mission, he prepared him to face his greatest fear, the distrust of his own people. Moses feared that the Israelites would not believe in him, that they would reject him as their leader, that they would mock his return after such a long time. And in that fear, Moses asked for a sign. But God did not give him a sign that he could control, it wasn't something that he could manipulate to prove his authority. Instead, God gave him what seemed like an even more difficult task. Moses had to go to Egypt and confront the Pharaoh directly. For Moses, this mission seemed impossible. How could he, a man without power, confront the most powerful leader of the time? But there was the key. God told Moses not to worry about the outcome but to trust in the process. He would give him the right words and equip him with everything he needed to fulfill the mission, even if Moses couldn't see the full picture. This is the lesson many of us forget. We don't need to have all the answers to act, all we need is the willingness to take a step forward, despite the fear. And when we take that step, that's when true greatness begins. God, just like he did with Moses, challenges you to leave behind your fears and doubts, to shed your excuses, and face the unknown. The burning bush is a reminder that what seems like an insurmountable obstacle is, in fact, an opportunity to trust in something greater than yourself. Moses not only had to face his own fears, but he also had to confront the disbelief of those he was meant to lead. Despite the doubts, despite the lack of faith from his people, Moses persevered, guided by a force beyond his comprehension. It is interesting how the burning bush remains a relevant symbol for us today. The fire does not consume the bush, showing us that although the world around us may be chaotic, although difficulties may threaten to consume us, God's presence does not extinguish. He holds us, protects us, and through his light, he guides us in every step of our journey. This also reflects a fundamental truth: the Christian life is not a life of comfort, but a life of challenge and growth. God calls us to take risks, to move forward in faith, even when the path is uncertain. And sometimes, that faith isn't a feeling of certainty, but an act of courage to take the first step without seeing the end of the journey. In Moses' story, after the burning bush, God's call leads him to Egypt, where he faces even greater challenges than ever. In fact, the deliverance of the people of Israel was no easy task. Every time Moses went to Pharaoh with God's demand, he was rejected. Every time it seemed like the people of Israel were on the brink of liberation, something else arose to keep them trapped in slavery. But what Moses didn't know in those moments of despair was that each of these challenges was part of a much greater plan. God was working in Moses' life, in the lives of the Israelites, and even in the lives of the Egyptians. Every obstacle, every moment of difficulty, was an opportunity for God's glory to manifest in a more powerful way, and in all of this, the most important lesson was this: salvation doesn't come in the way we expect. Moses didn't receive an instant victory. The deliverance didn't come with a single word, but was the result of a series of events that showed patience, perseverance, and God's faithfulness. The process of liberation was long and often seemed hopeless. But through every plague, through every challenge, God's voice never stopped guiding Moses until the people of Israel were finally set free. This relates to our own lives. We often expect problems to be solved immediately, we expect answers to come quickly, but the truth is that God works in mysterious ways. The burning bush teaches us that God's presence doesn't always come in the way we imagine. He doesn't always give us an instant solution. Instead, he guides us through the challenges, giving us the strength to endure and the faith to move forward. When we are in the midst of our trials, we can remember Moses and the burning bush. Even though the fire burns and difficulties surround us, God's presence remains with us, and through that presence, we find the peace to face whatever comes. The burning bush also shows the importance of obedience to God. Moses could have rejected the call, he could have decided that he wasn't capable of fulfilling the mission. But he chose to obey. And in his obedience, he witnessed unimaginable miracles. The same happens in our lives. Obeying God doesn't always make sense in the moment, but it is in that obedience where we find our true strength and purpose. When we choose to follow God's path, even when we don't understand everything happening, that's when we begin to experience the transformation He has prepared for us. The secret of the burning bush is much deeper than many believe. It is not just a symbol of God's presence, but a reminder that, although we may not understand His plan, He is always by our side, guiding us, preparing us for what is to come, and showing us that, through His light, anything is possible. So, the next time you face a challenge, remember the burning bush. Remember that God is there, in the midst of the fire, and His presence will never abandon you. If Moses could confront Pharaoh, you too can face your fears. If Moses could lead the Israelites to freedom, you too can find freedom in your life. Because what we learn from the burning bush is this: with God, everything is possible. As Moses continued to face one challenge after another, God continued to prove His power and faithfulness. The 10 plagues were not only signs of divine power but also of divine patience. They were not designed simply to punish but to reveal the hard hearts of those who had oppressed His people and to show the Israelites that their freedom would come at a great cost. The plagues were a call to repentance for Egypt, but Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. Making the situation more difficult for Moses and the people of Israel, one of the most striking aspects of this story is that Moses was not alone in his mission. Yes, he had doubts. Yes, he questioned his abilities, but God gave him the strength he needed. When Moses spoke to Pharaoh, it wasn't just Moses speaking, it was God's power at work. This lesson is powerful for us today. We often feel that we are too weak to face the challenges before us, but just like Moses, when we rely on God's strength, we can accomplish what seems impossible. The Israelites had a long road ahead of them, even after the Exodus. After their liberation from Egypt, they faced more obstacles, including the wilderness and their own disobedience. But through every trial, God was present. He led them by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, showing them that even when they could not see the way forward, He was guiding them. This is the secret that many of us miss, even in the wilderness moments of life. When we feel lost and unsure, God's guidance is still there. Sometimes, His presence is not immediately visible, but it is always there, leading us through every storm. The story of Moses and the burning bush teaches us that God often calls us to step out of our comfort zones and face the unknown, but He does not leave us to do it on our own. He equips us, strengthens us, and guides us every step of the way. And the most amazing thing is that He uses ordinary people like Moses to do extraordinary things. Moses was not a perfect man. He had a history of mistakes, and he had doubts, yet God chose him for an incredible mission. God sees potential in each of us, and He calls us to be part of His greater plan. The burning bush also serves as a reminder of God's holiness. When Moses approached the bush and heard God's voice, he was told to remove his sandals because he was standing on holy ground. This moment was not just about the mission but also about recognizing the sacredness of the moment. We are often in such a rush in our lives that we miss the sacred moments where God speaks to us. Just as Moses had to remove his sandals to stand in reverence before God, we too must remove the distractions and noise in our lives to truly hear His voice. Another important lesson from Moses' encounter with the burning bush is the idea of divine timing. Moses had been in exile for years before God called him back to Egypt, and yet the time had not been right until that moment. Many of us get frustrated when things don't happen according to our own timeline. We feel like we should have been somewhere else by now or that we've missed our chance. But God's timing is perfect. He knows when we are truly ready for the challenges ahead. Moses wasn't called to deliver Israel until he had learned the lessons he needed in the wilderness. His time in the desert was not wasted, it was preparation for the great task ahead. When we look at the journey of Moses, we realize that it wasn't just about one man leading a nation out of slavery. It was about a greater story unfolding, a story of redemption and restoration. Moses' obedience to God, despite his fears and doubts, was part of a much larger narrative that would change the course of history. And as we look at our own lives, we see that our stories too are part of a much larger story. When we respond to God's calling, even if we don't understand all that it entails, we are playing a part in something greater than ourselves. The burning bush, in all its mystery and power, serves as a profound reminder that God's presence can be found in the most unexpected places. It teaches us that God is not confined to the temples or holy places we create, but that He can meet us in the ordinary moments of our lives. Moses was not seeking God when he came across the burning bush. He was simply doing his work, living his life. But in that moment, God interrupted his life with a call. Sometimes, God's calling comes when we least expect it, when we are simply going about our daily routines. Are we open to recognizing God in those moments, or are we too busy to notice? Moses was reluctant at first, and so are many of us. When we are faced with God's call, we often try to find reasons not to respond. We feel unworthy, inadequate, or incapable. But the truth is that God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Just as He equipped Moses with everything he needed to confront Pharaoh, He will equip us for the tasks He sets before us. The burning bush is a reminder that God's calling is not based on our abilities but on His power working through us. As we reflect on the lessons from Moses' encounter with the burning bush, we realize that God's presence, His guidance, and His call are available to us all. The burning bush was not a one-time event for Moses. It is a timeless symbol of God's desire to reveal Himself to us, to call us to something greater, and to lead us through every trial and challenge. It is a reminder that no matter where we are, no matter what we are facing, God is with us. And just as He was with Moses in the wilderness, He will be with us, guiding us, empowering us, and helping us fulfill our purpose. So, as you go through your day, remember the burning bush. Remember that God is with you, even in the toughest moments. And remember that He has a purpose for your life that is greater than anything you can imagine. Just as Moses found his calling in the wilderness, you too can find yours. Trust in God's timing, trust in His presence, and step forward in faith. The burning bush is waiting for you,